Good morning. Ravi, it is so good to see you again. Ravi Kumar is president of Infosys, and there's a ton of information about Ravi's background in the program, but since we don't have a tremendous amount of time, I thought, Ravi, we should go ahead and just jump right in. One of the things that, that your company has done, which, by the way, has a really fascinating history, why don't we just start there? If you can tell us about the history of your company, which is one of the pioneers of offshoring, and then we can go from there.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to your audience today. Infosys started 40 plus years ago back in India. We were one of those pioneers which defined why the world is flat, and we introduced to the world, virtualization of work and moving work to places where there is good capability. And that was way back when offshoring was in vogue. And now in the times we're all living in, where digital technologies are consumed in closer proximity to enterprises, we've flipped the whole model, and we are building capabilities in and around enterprises which are going through digital transformation. So North America is one of our biggest markets, where we are invested in training, education, and infrastructure to build feeders of talent into digital capabilities. So it's kind of, we went the full circle, if I may, in the last 40 years.
Okay. Terrific. And as you mentioned, and I just want to pick up on that, you have now come into North America. You've opened up in the United States some time ago, and now you're coming into Canada. Talk to us about what drove that decision.
Sure. So, John, digital technologies are consumed in closer proximity to enterprises. Historically, Infosys, the largest market for Infosys was North America. As digital technologies are consumed, you will have to build those capabilities in and around the principal markets. We made an announcement in the United States in 2017 that we're going to do 10,000 jobs. We pumped up that announcement in 2020 to convert that into 25,000 jobs. And we made an announcement in Canada for 3,000 jobs a few months ago. We opened a center in Vancouver, in Toronto, and Calgary. And we believe the future is all about co-creation and co-innovation with large enterprises. And therefore, our ability to build these nearshoring and proximity centers in and around our client clusters. So one of our biggest strengths, John, as a company is we invest on lifelong learning infrastructure. Way back in 30 plus years ago, Infosys established the largest corporate training university in India. And now we are establishing a training facility in Indianapolis in the US. And we are working with universities in Toronto, in Calgary, in Vancouver, and in all the US cities. And our idea is to actually hire talent from schools and build a feeder with training infrastructure. So we train for like 12 to 15 weeks. And we get people ready for digital jobs of the future. That's our strength. So in some ways, that is the roots of the company, building learning infrastructure, building feeders of talent, not just hiring people who already have the skills, but hiring people from colleges who have the potential, hiring people without a degree who have the potential, and identifying the potential, investing on training, and then building capabilities. Technology skills are in huge dearth, especially now. They're in acute shortage because digitization is rapidly accelerating. In some ways, it was happening before the health crisis, and now it's got accelerated. So we believe that building those feeders of talent is the only way to bridge the gap.
Now, Ravi, a lot of people have been talking recently about the Great Escape. Before we talk about the solution that you have for that, let's talk about what impact has the Great Escape had on Infosys and your business, particularly here in North America.
John, that's a great question, actually. Everybody is debating on this topic. I would say there is a confluence of complex forces which are defining where we are. On one side, we could call it a human capital crisis. On the other side, we could actually call it as an opportunity for enterprises to actually hire talent which was not available before. It's a great resignation on one side, and then there's a great reshuffle on the other side. And let me illustrate what I meant. 70% of the people are now saying they want to go back to work, have the physical connections, go back to conferences like this. 70% of the people are actually saying they want the flexibility. So it's a dichotomy of sorts. Flexibility is no longer about where you want to work and when you want to work. Flexibility is also about why you want to work. Why is it that you want to work? What is the purpose? What are the priorities? Who are the people you want to work with? Equally, there are 11 million jobs in the United States, 11 million jobs of the future with no people. There are 8 million people available who do not have jobs. So we've never had that gap ever before. And every market is like this. You have jobs of the future, which are built by new age AI technologies. And you have people of the past with no skills to fill the jobs of the future. So that's one big challenge. Because individuals are revisiting what their purpose is, there is a great resignation. 4 million people every month in the United States are leaving jobs. The attrition rates at every industry, every company has gone up, including the tech sector and companies like Infosys. Everybody is impacted by this. And in some sectors where the upward mobility of jobs is not there, there are 7 million people leaving, 7% of the workforce leaving in those industries. At an average, 4% is leaving every industry. But some of the industries where the social mobility is not there, there are 7% leaving. 4 million people a month is literally, you're turning around the whole company in 12 to 18 months, any enterprise. So that's a big shift. The third fix, which I believe is again a tectonic shift, is work is going from full-time to part-time. And most major economies across the world have a labor participation of 60-odd%. What I mean by that is number of people eligible to do jobs and number of people who are doing jobs. That's roughly at the range of 65 to 70%. That number has to go up if we start to look at full-time work and gig work. And gig work will hopefully change the paradigm of the number of people who can actually come to workplaces. 40% of the people are saying they want to leave in the next 6 months. In fact, some industries it is much more. Machines are taking over the traditional cognitive of solving problems in a workplace. And therefore, the human endeavor is going to switch to purposeful finding problems. And if that happens, the cognitive diversity in workplaces is going to change significantly. And finally, work is getting dispersed. The template of work today, John, which has been established 100+ years ago during the Industrial Revolution, has work entangled with physical workplaces and workforce coming to a workplace, a physical workplace, to get the productivity and work there. So workplaces and workforce are entangled. Digital technologies are going to actually break that entanglement. They're going to disentangle, as I call it. Work is going to become more modular. It's going to be dispersed out of rich urban settings. Workplaces are going to become much more virtual, and of course, workforce is going to become much more cognitively diverse, because problem solving is no longer the human endeavor. Problem solving and problem finding will be the new endeavor. So all of these forces put together is completely changing the paradigm of work, the workplaces and workforce. And therefore, every enterprise, every industry has to revisit how they're going to actually orchestrate work. What is the platform they're going to build which will orchestrate work? And that's the reason why it's a very complex situation we are in. And upward mobility of jobs, which was a big issue in the past, has never been dealt with. And if we can deal with upward mobility well, we could actually reset into a much more inclusive and diverse workplace of the future. And I think we have this unique, narrow opportunity to fix the diversity and inclusivity problem we have actually dealt with for years and decades in workplaces. Because if work is going to be just dispersed, it's going to be more democratized, you have an opportunity to give access to a larger human capital and a larger population across the world.
You know, Ravi, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about when you started with Infosys some 30 years ago with offshoring. You were sort of nibbling around the edges in terms of work and where people work and how work is done. Now it seems that there's something that's happening that's far deeper, that's affecting all phases of work. Have you ever seen anything like this that's going on now?
It's never happened before, John. So I would say, in a way, the change was very gradual even before the health crisis. Every industry was becoming a software industry. Every company was becoming a software company. Software was becoming the new alchemy. So some of these changes were coming gradually, and there wasn't a confluence. I think the health crisis has just accelerated that process. We could reset it for a better future, or we could actually broaden the gap and not bridge the gap. There is one other area I'm deeply researched on, which is the connection between education and work. Education, John, all of us, we studied and went to schools for the first 30 years or maybe first 25 years, and then we applied what we studied for the next 50 years of our professional life. That's how the template was. And that template was valid for the Industrial Revolution, where the change was not significant, and therefore you could go to an educational institution for the first few years and then apply it all your life. With the life of skills being much shorter, the ability to run that template doesn't exist anymore. That template is out of the window. Education is intertwined with work, and education is micro-modular, and you can pretty much create a lifelong template, lifelong learning template at work. Again, this raises very important questions. In the last 20 years, education has, all over the world, the cost of education has gone up by 150%. Inflation has only gone up by 50%. So what has really happened is education was supposed to be that bridge, and that bridge which was creating that social mobility for people to access opportunities, that went away. We now have one more unique chance to intertwine education and work in our workplaces, and therefore get access to a larger pool of talent available out there, which doesn't have access to education.
Okay,
so
great.
I would say that's another big shift which has happened in work today.
Okay, great, Ravi. Then this brings us to some extent, and you've touched on it, the solution. Is it? I know you've talked in the past about the Great Reset. Is that the solution to the Great Escape or the Great Resignation? How do we start solving this problem?
So, John, there isn't a silver bullet for this, but there are a couple of interesting solutions which we could all work on. First of all, reskilling infrastructure and lifelong learning templates are very, very critical. My personal opinion is institutions have to invest on learning infrastructure, and they have to build consortiums with academic institutions and policymakers in the local circles. So that's a big shift. No longer can you think that education will be the feeder for work. You have to intertwine education and work together because skills are very short-lived. And you know, the good news is if this is the future, degrees are no longer the need for creating feeders to work. Degrees have in some ways created that rift between who has access to education and therefore access to work. So you could actually hire without degrees. You could hire on potential. Infosys has actually orchestrated a very good template of hiring on potential and investing on training infrastructure and then actually creating feeders to work. So reskilling infrastructure and learning infrastructure for enterprises is the first suggestion I have. The second is bring non-STEM skills into workplaces because AI software is going to slowly take over solving problems, and therefore you could create much more cognitive diversity in workplaces. Hybrid workplaces and the ability to hire in distinctively different parts of the world. You know, back in the United States, we hire in tier 2 towns and tier 2 cities. That's because there is a jewel of talent available there. Third, hire without degrees. 50% of the US workforce doesn't have a degree, and they don't have upward mobility of jobs. If skills are so short-lived, degrees no longer matter anymore. Why not hire on potential and invest on the reskilling infrastructure and create feeders of talent? We go to community colleges in the US. We hire without degrees. We have created a template of evaluating people on potential. People are stuck on low potential jobs, but they have high potential. And transition them on an apprenticeship. You know, Germany, during the Industrial Revolution, created a template for apprenticeship for manufacturing. You could now create a template, you know, we call it the digital apprenticeship, and create a feeder, land them on jobs, and create upward mobility in organizations.
Ravi, I want you to come. I don't want to cut necessarily into, and I want to come back to your solutions. But you're talking about hiring people without degrees. In some industries in the United States, or some professions, not having a degree is a detriment to a lot of employees. How do you get over that by hiring more people without degrees?
Yeah, so John, you know, it's just been traditional for enterprises and industries across the world to stipulate a minimum requirement of a degree, even if a degree is not needed for the job. In fact, there is a survey which was conducted, which actually said that 50% of the jobs which are asking for a degree do not need a degree. In fact, we have, in technology jobs, we have created a bunch of pathways for people to be hired without a degree. It's just unfortunate that they've been stuck on low potential jobs. And because they've been stuck on low potential jobs, they have not seen mobility, upward mobility, and they have not got reskilled to transition from one job to the other, even within the same company or in the industry or across industries. So I think the first step we have to take is we have to start to reevaluate whether some of the jobs we are hiring for really need a degree or not. And if the degree is not needed, you should attempt to hire without a degree and create the training infrastructure needed. It's an investment, and it's a punt, I would call, which enterprises have to take. That's one part of the story. The second part of the story is to create those feeders and training infrastructure and pathways for people to actually access the jobs which they do not have access to. 25% of the US student population goes to community colleges. Community colleges do not have access to good jobs, but there is a jewel of talent available there. There are people with life skills because they're all working with 2 or 3 part-time jobs, and in parallel, they're also studying for a better future. Working, they're doing a few credits for the future. So one of the templates we have attempted, John, is to hire from community colleges, hire without degrees, and create immersive templates at work along with universities so that you could actually give credits to people for the experiential learning they're going through at workplace. So you could end up with 60 credits in a couple of years and then get a degree if you want to, because the rest of the world is asking you for one, though Infosys is not. So that's one way to do it. You could create digital apprenticeship at the bottom of the pyramid and then create that mobility as people get credits working at workplaces. The last piece I wanted to talk about is, most large enterprises across the world have full-time workers. Gig work is today still a part of the ride-sharing economy. It's really not mainstream in large enterprises. Large enterprises can adapt gig work because digital platforms allows you to break work into modular small pieces. And if you can do so, you can get a much bigger population available for work. Remember, there are people who do not have access to full-time work, either because they have something else to take care of, they have adult care, they have child care, there are a whole bunch of things people work on. So if you can break work into gig work, create platforms, make enterprises platforms for gig work, and then create feeders of talent from there, that's a huge opportunity. In fact, there's a survey in the United States which was done now, where more than half the Americans actually said they want to be self-employed gig workers or content curators. I think the labor force participation, which is roughly at around 62% in the US, can go up to 70-odd% if gig work becomes mainstream in large enterprises. And that's happened in some economies. Some economies actually run labor force participation in the range of 75 to 80%. That will get us more people at work. Remember, the number of jobs available in the market is significantly higher than the number of people available, almost in every economy. And the only gap is the skills needed on those jobs is very different to the people who are available.
Ravi, unfortunately, we only have 3 minutes left, but I wanted to get to something that you've talked about, and it seems to be transforming work for a lot of people, where we're talking about work, education, rest. People are really looking very differently at how to work compared to certainly during the industrial age or just a few years ago. How is that transforming work, the whole idea of work, education, and rest, which is very important to people now?
So John, we are going to go into an era where people are going to do multiple professions, multiple jobs in a lifetime. We have transitioned from a world where we did jobs for life to professions for life to multiple professions in life. We are going to go into an era where skills are going to be short-lived. And therefore you have to create recurring templates of learning, relearning, and unlearning because the world around us is dynamically changing. We are going to go into an era where the speed at which the clock speed at which the economies are going to move will not allow us to front-load education at the start of our lives and backload work to the future of our lives. We will have to start to intertwine work and education together. So keeping all these forces together, my belief is every enterprise has to be a learning enterprise. We have to change our recruiting strategy from hiring for skills, hiring for degrees, to hiring for potential. And we have to go into just-in-time learning rather than just-in-case learning. You know, what I mean by that is just-in-case learning is I learn for the first few years, assuming I will consume it at some point of my life. Just-in-time learning is I learn on the job and I have the aptitude to learn on the job and then apply to the job.
Hey, Ravi, in 30 seconds, there are a lot of people, particularly older workers, there's some fear about this change. How do you convince them, and I'm sorry, I'm only giving you 30 seconds. One thing can you tell older workers particularly given all the technological changes that are involved, that this is something that's good?
Yeah, so John, change is always difficult, but it's the only constant in all our lives. I would say the reason why people are scared of reskilling is because they don't find immersive templates at work. You just give them a bunch of things to absorb. You give them content to self-learn. Learning is always a journey. It has to be with a set of people who are going through the journey, and it has to be somebody who's hand-holding you and making it immersive enough. Workplaces don't invest in that, and that's why it's always scary for the change, because you are alone on that change. In the past, John, learning was always an individualistic thing. I would actually believe learning has to be done in enterprises, in consortiums, and it has to be immersive enough in your workplaces so that you're comfortable. And as long as we do that, I don't think there is anybody who should be scared about reskilling and building skills for the future.
Great, thank you, Ravi. Thank you so much. Learning is always a journey, and that's a good way to end our fireside chat. So good to see you, and thank you very much for joining us at the Toronto Global Forum.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for the conversation today.